Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023 at 8:57 a.m. Eastern Time, USA. I'm Mitch Miller. This is my video journal. Today, we're going to cover a variety of topics. What I want to start with first is what I call NORAD arguments. NORAD is a nuclear missile centralized computing system and anti-air missile defense system in case of a nuclear attack. And I experienced this when I was off my medication in a form of psychosis. I found that I was arguing with my spouse a lot more. Now, my spouse comes from her inheritance is from the Johnson & Johnson Corporation, and I found that I was attacking her father, and I think the root cause of this was that I was picking up the airwaves, and as I've argued, we're all kind of picking up on the airwaves, and what I felt was happening was that Johnson & Johnson was establishing more computer systems, and they were trying to classify their supercomputers as nuclear weapons on the defense system to give them another layer of protection, importance in the infrastructure of the United States. So as Johnson & Johnson infringed more on the NORAD computing system, I became more and more intense in my arguments. So maybe service member people in the military have experienced this. I mean, that's the thing. I've argued that these computers have been programming us since the 80s, right? So hypothetically, every argument you get into has to do with your 401k, what stocks you own, those companies' computer systems, and how they're infringing on the NORAD and getting closer to compromising the nuclear program of the United States. So maybe military personnel argue in the privacy of their home. Everything can be heard through your TVs, through your phones. So it's just a systematic arguing back and forth of basically two companies, two corporations, or the government and a corporation, and how their computer systems are interacting. The ultimate goal is to protect the NORAD system. So if I was in tune with the government frequencies, I was becoming intense in my arguments because NORAD was close to being compromised. And this happened to me in the EU with their NORAD-like system. Stayed out late, stayed in the bar late with a woman. We were flirting and stuff, and then it turned into an argument, and it ended with her actually punching me. I took it in the shoulder and I stopped her, but that's how intense the argument got out of nowhere. So arguments are interesting. We don't really know where they come from, and this is just a theory I'm putting out there. NORAD conversations and NORAD arguments, how the computers manifest themselves verbally in this insane Wi-Fi world we built. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is William Burns, director of the Central Intelligence Agency. I was looking at Reddit at the lake house, at my in-laws' lake house, and I was not on their Wi-Fi. I've not connected my cell phone to their Wi-Fi, to my knowledge, and since I've had it. Got a Reddit blurb. It said Jeffrey Epstein took meetings with important people even after he was a convicted sex offender or accused of sex offender. And it said that William Burns had taken meetings with him. I clicked on the article, and the article was only 2 paragraphs long, and it was all about William Burns. It didn't go into the other people that met with him. So I don't know if this blurb was designed specifically for me. I don't know how credible the source was. I forget what agency put it out, what news agency, but it said that William Burns, he was at the time worked for the State Department, I believe, now chief of the Central Intelligence Agency, met with Jeffrey Epstein 3 times after he was a convicted sex offender, I think once in New York and twice in D.C. or something like that. And I've argued that the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States has covered up pedophilia happening in the Philippines. Why would they do this? Probably so that they could blackmail businessmen, play the game as usual. Jeffrey Epstein, of course, had minors in his sex slavery ring, or people under age 18. So it reinforces this idea. Perhaps ranked officials, ranked military personnel, or ranked officials in the government want to challenge William Burns to a non-lethal duel, to get to the bottom of this, to ask him why, so that he'll reveal why and what he spoke with Epstein about, and hypothetically any files regarding the cover-up of United States business people traveling to the Philippines and engaging in sexual practices with people under the age of 18. And again, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States could have talked to me in person. I would have asked them this to their faces. Of course, I didn't have all this information up front, but I had my theories. In Costa Rica, I have not left the United States since 2017, when I was brought back against my will. This is the first time in 6 years I was out of the country. As we know, the Central Intelligence Agency does not have a charter to spy domestically. They can only act outside of the borders of the United States. So technically they've had no knowledge of my existence for the past 6 years or any of these videos, but they had access in Costa Rica. Could have approached me. Now, what were they worried about? I would reject working with them because they are an agency that we know for a fact tortures individuals at their black sites for so-called intelligence, targets and kills people using unmanned flying death machines, and third, hypothetically, covers acts of pedophilia by high-powered business people from the United States. But you could have still asked for the job, right? You're not going to get the job unless you ask for it, as we say in sales. All right, moving on. The Supreme Court of the United States, as I pointed out, has a Nazi sympathizer in its ranks. It's becoming more and more evident that they are corrupt. They take gifts. They have no code of ethics. This is unacceptable, that the highest court of the land is not accountable to the people, to any code of ethics. I would suggest 10-year term limits at the very least, a code of ethics adopted. I'm all for some kind of investigatory agency that looks into the Supreme Court. But again, we can't get Congress to be transparent. So how are we going to get the Supreme Court to be transparent, right? They could come back and say, will adopt a code of ethics if every congressperson in the federal Congress, every senator and every representative, becomes as transparent as Kenneth Bryan running for county commissioner, in which they have a website where they post a donor list, a list of all their expenses, hold a podcast, or as transparent as Mitch Miller proposes on his Mitch for Mayor website. He's running for county commissioner, but not really. But here's what he says every elected official could do for free using the tools available on the internet. So that's what I would do as the Supreme Court to prove that you are not a bunch of Nazi sympathizers and do want to adopt a code of ethics. You stand at a point where you could come back through a press release and say we will adopt a code of ethics if the entire Congress adopts a code of transparency to all of its constituents. I hope that happens. I'm not holding my breath because the powers that be love their power and love to operate in secrecy and make secret laws and so on and so forth. I did reach out to a friend of mine that I've done work for in the past that is running for judge here in Allegheny County, offered to do the same intro for the podcast that I did for Ken Bryan. His name is Patrick Sweeney. Offered to help in any way I can, including I could donate $160 to his campaign to put a website up for him, get the transparency on the judge level. So I'm working from the local level to get the judges, to get the county commissioners, to get the elected officials to be transparent. It's a slow process, could take 20 years, but the Supreme Court could do this very quickly and say you need to be transparent. And they could also come back and say you need to fund a comprehensive video series that explains what's illegal and what's legal in the United States. I could make that video series. Other people are qualified to do that, so on and so forth. What I'm going to end with here is another conspiracy theory. I threw one out yesterday. Here's one. And that one was pertaining to females and breast cancer. This one is for the males. I call it the American cheese theory. And I guess it has to do with trans individuals, people who transition to another sex, another gender. What is the root cause of this situation? That's what I like to get at, is what are the root causes of these things? Like, what's the root cause of terrorism? Instead of fighting terrorism by torturing people at black sites, killing them with unmanned flying death machines, and covering up pedophilia and wrong acts by business people, we could change the way United States business people do business, right? Instead of enslaving the world, which leads to terrorism, that's the root cause. The business practices of United States corporate America, large corporations, how they can hide their acts and manipulate the masses. What's the root cause of transgender situation? I don't know the exact terminology of how to refer to transgender individuals, someone transitioning to another sex, going through the actual surgery and the physical change of and taking hormones of the opposite sex. Here's one root cause theory I have. I call it the American cheese theory. So there was a study 10 to 15 years ago. It was on NPR, it was in some of the news, that exposure to certain plastic residue or certain plastic byproducts that was released into swamplands was causing male frogs to turn into female frogs. Now, this occurs naturally. I think it occurs from female to male naturally in the wild. But it might go both ways in the wild. But they found that it was an accelerated rate of transition if they were exposed to certain plastic chemicals, right? And they said they zeroed in on the type of plastic and they're not using it in consumer goods anymore, right? But who's checking into that, right? Is the petrochemical industry really policed to see if they're releasing these chemicals that are this plastic is touching our food? My theory is that American cheese singles, the plastic they're wrapped in, has that type of chemical, that there's an evil, not an evil, but a conspiracy of business people in the petrochemical industry that are feminizing men, right? So that's the essence of the theory. And there's all these laws passing against transgenderism in all these state houses, and I say you can't make transgender illegal unless you make the petrochemical industry illegal, right? Unless you police it and regulate it, over-regulate it, or make it or eliminate it totally. To totally eliminate the petrochemical industry, right? I mean, we have microplastics in our water. We're all taking in a bunch of plastic. And if it's this certain type of plastic that feminizes frogs, it could be having the same effect on humans. It could be causing impotence at an early age in men, right? Causing certain individuals to want to change their gender to the opposite gender because of petrochemicals in touching our food. The Tupperware containers we use, are those cleared? You know, you're reheating food in Tupperware containers that are made of plastic. There's all kinds of ways that we're exposed to plastics and petrochemical products. And did we ever establish an official policing agency that tested all the consumer plastics that are used to touch the food? Or did we just take the petrochemical industry at their word that they're not using that specific type of plastic that was shown to change male frogs into females, right? So that's the American cheese theory. If you're going to make it illegal for gender confirming surgery and procedures, then you have to also make the petrochemical industry illegal. Plastic production, the production of plastics heavily regulated or illegal. Those go hand in hand. I think the transgender community should make their arguments geared towards this, and we might see some interesting legislation come about, right? But that's a conspiracy theory. Let's get to the root causes of why people might want to transition their gender, why men might have impotence at an earlier and earlier age, because in women, if you've noticed that men are too sensitive of this generation, right? Number one, we're not shooting all our meat with human growth hormone, which led to a lot of things. But number two, we have the petrochemicals, microplastics everywhere, plastics touching everything. So if you are upset that men are too sensitive these days, and that this generation is just all a bunch of sensitive whatever, well, part of the root cause of that could be the petrochemical industry and plastics. Just saying. So if you want those manly men out there again, maybe you should look into the petrochemical and plastics industry and how we can regulate and hypothetically eliminate that industry someday. Thanks for watching. Join me tomorrow when I talk about the debt limit and some other topics that I've written down in my notepad. AI, or bank failure, so on and so forth. So, thanks for watching and join me tomorrow. After tomorrow, I won't be accessible to this computer until the following Monday, so tomorrow will be it for some time. Thanks for watching.